And I was inspired by that, and so I decided that I'm going to develop a chicken house on steroids.
Howdy doodle 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 do. Howdy doodle 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 do.
I'm out here in front of the chicken house because we're beginning a new project in the chicken house. My mentor, my permaculture mentor, Geoff Lawton, visited a guy named Carl Hammer up in the northeastern United States some years ago now. Geoff is in Australia, of course, and he was doing a tour in the United States at different permaculture operations, and he had heard about Carl's operation, and he went to visit him. Now, Carl is a compost guy. He's a farmer, but his main business is making compost. And if you see the video, it's just piles and piles, enormous mountains of compost. And he has tractors and all kinds of stuff that he does. But he also has about 600 chicken. And Geoff Lawton was very intrigued by the chickens being there. So Carl has an egg business with the chickens that's kind of a side business, and he happened to mention to Geoff that he didn't have to buy any feed. The chickens just were there. They lived off the compost, and Geoff was very intrigued by that. He went back to Australia and attempted to develop a system that would recapitulate what Carl was doing on his farm, and Geoff called it Chicken Tractor on Steroids. And the chicken tractor on steroids was a fairly simple thing. You can look it up on YouTube, Geoff Lawton chicken tractor on steroids, and you'll see the video. And I had originally, when we first bought the farm here, I had originally said, I want to do that. I want to do that. That's very cool. Well, I mentioned in another video that we have a predator problem here, a pretty serious one. Most of our chickens were being killed, and that's why we built the chicken house, to protect the chickens. So the whole chicken tractor idea didn't work very well for us. So I kind of abandoned the idea of the chicken tractor on steroids. That's until I found another YouTube channel. And that's Billy at Permaculture's farm. Now, Billy is a permaculture guy. He says he's a permaculture pimp daddy, where pimp means permaculture is my passion. That's what Billy says. Permaculture is my passion, and he really is passionate about it. And he picked up this chicken tractor on steroids because his son, like me, years ago, went to do a permaculture design certificate course with Geoff Lawton, and he learned about the chicken tractor on steroids, and Billy became very excited about it, and they developed their own system for it. Their system is different from Geoff's. And I was inspired by Billy's videos because he's encouraging people to do it. And I was inspired by that, and so I decided that I'm going to develop a chicken house on steroids. And we're going to go through the process in several videos here of how we're doing it. Now, basically what it involves is, here is a garbage can full of bedding that we use for the sheep. Now, I take this every day because the sheep are peeing in the bedding, and sometimes they're even pooping in there. And I gather up this bedding, put it in the garbage can. So for 7 days, I do this, and I dump it in here with the chickens. Now, we also have here a pail of sheep poop, what we call acetico in Spanish, that I gather up as well from around in the area that the sheep are. Because with compost, you need to have about a 20 to 30 ratio of carbon to nitrogen to make good compost. And so some of this sheep poop will serve as part of the nitrogen source. This serves as the big carbon source. So I put this in every day. For 7 days, the chickens will dance around on that, and they'll poop on it too and add more nitrogen to it. And then what I'm going to do is, and I just keep layering it on there, and you'll see that. We have to wet it and all of that. But then I take it and I'm going to pile it up into a compost pile. And we're going to leave that for 7 days, and we're going to let the chickens climb on the pile and tear it apart, and I'm going to build the pile back up again. And then after 7 more days, so 14 days, I'll have a new batch of this material that's been, you know, percolating for 7 days, and I'm gonna pile that up. So now I'm going to have 2 piles, and I'm going to just keep going. And so at the end of a month, I'm going to have about a cubic meter of compost. And after that time, I'll be making about a cubic meter of compost every week, every single week. And because I'm doing it that way, I'll be able to reduce the amount of feed that we give to the chickens. Because the compost contains a lot of things like fly eggs and eggs for other insects, and the chickens go and they love that stuff. And so they eat that, they get a lot of their protein from that. So they don't need as much feed. So we're now going to stop. We're going to go inside the chicken house, and I'm going to show you how the process is going to start. Okay, now here we are inside the chicken house. Here is the area here that I've prepared, where I'm going to pile up the material in just a minute. And here is the material here, over here where the chickens are. This has been percolating here for 7 days. Now remember, I bring a garbage can of new carbon source straw in here every day, a garbage can, and some of the sheep poop as well. I also put chicken scraps here, put a little bit of feed in here, and the chickens, of course, are picking through it and having a good time. So, in keeping with the instructions of Billy at Permaculture's farm, the first thing I'm going to do is to wet this area. The water is a major component of the process. Very important that we get the material wet, because that's what helps the bacteria to survive. And without water, the bacteria won't be able to survive. And without bacteria, we don't get the compost. So I'm just wetting this area first. This is according to Billy's instructions. And I'm basically trying to adapt. I'm basically trying to adapt what Billy does at Permaculture's farm to what we're doing here at Angelita farm within an inside structure. Okay, so now I'm going to take the material out of here, and Lena's going to film me doing it. Now, one of the things that Billy recommends, actually his son recommends this, is that when you're putting the material, you kind of fluff it up a little bit so you get plenty of oxygen in there. Now you can see the chickens are already interested in it. So let's go and get this out of here. This is a departure from the way that Billy does it. Billy has a chicken tractor, and so he has it a different way. I'm trying to adapt what Billy does to our situation here, and kind of what Billy has encouraged people to do. is to experiment with new ways of doing it. This is already pretty wet because I've been wetting it every day. But I'm going to give it more moisture just to make sure that we have enough. Because if we don't have the moisture, we're not going to get the composting process going. A little bit more water. Now you may notice that there's some white areas in here. Now what Billy and his son say is that this means that the temperature is getting too hot, and these are bacteria that have died as a result. So maybe in the future I won't put as much of the sheep poop in there. I think I'm giving it enough water, so I may have to adjust the amount of sheep poop that gets put in there and see if that helps. The chickens like it when I do this because there's always a bunch of insects under here, and they have a real field day gorging themselves on insects. Now again, we have to wet this, and we do this because if we don't wet it, the ground acts like a sponge and takes all of the moisture away from the straw that we're putting in there that we're trying to compost. So by wetting this, we basically fill the sponge with water, so it's not going to take any more. So now we're starting a new week. So this pile here was week 1, 7 days of making the pile, and now we're going with week 2. So I just simply take this, dump it on in there, scrub this out. Of course the chickens will spread it out too, but I'd like to help them along a little bit and make sure that it gets kind of evenly spread out. You know, I think I'm not going to put this in there and see if we still get the white stuff. In other words, the chickens may be giving us lots of nitrogen already, and we don't need a huge amount more. So now we're going to put some feed in here to make sure that the chickens scratch this. forgot to do one thing. It's not going to be a big deal, but I forgot to wet this straw after I spread it out. It's better that the straw get a little wet. Okay, Butch, no matter how much I try to avoid you, Butch, you always seem to find a way to run into the water. Because the water is the key to the process. Now, as you can see, they're in here really going to town on the food that I put in there. In an hour or so, they will have exhausted all of this food, and they'll move over to here, and actually over to this, which is an older pile. But this isn't part of the experiment. If you remember in the first video that we made about the chickens, I mentioned that this was a deep bedding system. Well, I'm converting it from a deep bedding system. So this is all the compost that is coming out of the deep bedding system, this big pile here. And I'm going to be spreading that out and filtering it and what have you. But the problem with deep bedding is that it makes fantastic compost, but it takes like a year before you can really harvest it. And then you get it all at once. This system gives you compost every week. Every week you get a new batch of compost. So if you find these videos to be beneficial to you or useful in some way, please consider clicking the like button. That helps YouTube to identify that people like the video, and they'll show it to other people as well so they get to see it. If you like the channel itself, please consider subscribing to it. So with that, this is the first installment of the chicken house on steroids, and we'll see what's going to happen over time. We'll make more videos and return to this. So that's it for today. We'll see you in the next video.